Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for Black Butler, chapter 189. When we last left our heroes, shit hit the fan. Things weren't going well for anyone except for Layla. Even Layla wasn't doing great. But she stabbed Baldroy, inflicted a potentially mortal wound on him, revealed herself to be a bizarre doll, went to go kill Lau. Lau fought back. Baldroy wasn't quite dead, and so he got some more hits on her. And, you know, at that point, Layla was kind of fully surrounded. Lau and Baldroy kind of had her right where they wanted her. And so she was able to escape, run away. There's a mysterious person named Al who was supposed to be a helper but didn't show up for her. We don't quite know what that's about. But Baldroy is dying. Might already be dead. But there's this line that Layla had about, like, both Baldroy and Lau being the right food for her, implying they share a blood type, and given that Baldroy is currently dying of blood loss, that feels like maybe Yana is setting up that Lau will have to, like, give a blood transfusion to save Baldroy, which was theorized in a comment in last month's video. I do want to say, on regards to that, I think that will only work if Lau fights it first. I think if Lau just freely gives his blood, that kind of ruins the whole thing. That ruins the whole drama of the scene. But if it's like a bit of a... he has to decide whether to save Baldroy or go after Layla. If he chooses saving Baldroy, that can really work. But anyway, that being said, we'll see what comes on as this chapter plays out. In chapter 189, The Butler Snickering. On our picture here is this Baldroy in, like, wheat fields. It brings to mind both, like, the sort of American West where he grew up. It also reminds me of the glimpse of heaven from, like, from the end of Future Lucy's story in Fairy Tale, which fits where Baldroy is right now, cast ashore on a land of gold. And we open with Baldroy opening his eyes in that wheat field, but where in the cover he's in his chef's outfit with the phantom hives. Here he's in his farmer's garb from before the attack. And he looks around, and he feels something hit him in the back of the head. Ow! And he turns around, and it's Baldroy, it's little Baldroy Jr. Of course, it is, you know, as I kind of assumed, a version of heaven. Here comes Baldroy Jr. And I thought that the O there, the first O, was only part of Baldroy's nickname. I thought his full name didn't have the first O. But whatever, it's not important. There's also this interesting font choice, which, like, is that like a sort of ghostly font thing, or like that Ghost used that font? I never really think of Black Butler as being a series that, like, uses specific fonts for, like, impactfulness, like you might see Into Your Eternity or something. I don't know. It's a really weird font, which is why I bring it up. But Baldroy watches the ghost of his son run to their farmhouse, which is not destroyed in this vision. And his wife, whose name I'm blanking on, sees him. Welcome home. And then laughs. Why are you dressed that way? And he looks down, and he's turned into... his clothes have changed into his kitchen outfit. What we saw on the cover, what we've seen throughout the whole series, his outfit with the phantom hives. And then he just closes his eyes. Listen up. Don't be too surprised. I'm working as a chef at a residence of a British aristocrat. And then, once again, you know, when the wife first appears, she's using a normal font. But then she uses that weird, like, gap font, is what I want to call it. Like, the O has this weird gap in it. And I think we saw that with the B in Baldroy Jr. up there. Yeah, that also had a weird gap in it. I might be looking too deep into this, like I did with To Your Eternity's font questions. But I don't know, it was a really unique font. It might just be, like, to show surprise, but I don't know why they wouldn't just go for bolding at that point. I don't know. I might be focusing on absolutely nothing. That is the kind of reviewer I am, as I'm sure y'all know at this point. But his wife reacts, "What? You're a chef of a nobleman, but you never set foot in the kitchen after we got married." And Baldroy just tells her, "Awesome, right? I couldn't even peel potatoes properly at first. And then I then realized how amazing you are. It's a really crazy place. The other servants can only do housekeeping as well as I can, but..." And we have this image of him in that happy life with the servants. I love that even Tanaka, who at this point is like, he's betrayed CL, is still there in this fantasy. But it wasn't a bad place to work. And see, Baldroy can bold. Why can't the ghosts bold? I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. But anyway, his wife says, that's so. Good for you. And Baldroy just smiles at her. I can make fried eggs now. And his son, in a different bolded font. I don't know if I'm crazy trying to think if there is something going on here with the font. I don't know. But like, I don't know why. I don't even think this would be Yana. I think this would be the English translation team that chooses these fonts. I don't know what's going on in their minds. I don't know if it matters, but I'm thinking about it. Anyway, Baldo Jr. says, I love eggs. And Baldroy, which this seems to be sort of him accepting his death, this line. Then I'll make all the fried eggs you want. And he heads towards them, his vision of paradise. But a voice calls out, well, well. And Sebastian appears behind him. For a second there, when I saw the well, I thought it would be Lau. Because Lau is the one who seemingly has the ability to save him. Though I was prepared to be disappointed if the whole saving Baldroy thing happened. While that was happening, we were firmly in Baldroy's dream state, and we didn't get to see the struggle. But instead, it's Sebastian. And I have no idea what Sebastian's going to be doing here. I do not approve of lying. You can make fried eggs. 8 out of 10, they're scrambled eggs, burnt to a crisp. Is this here to roast him? Or I don't know. Okay, here's the thing. Because none of the servants have died before. Have they made even like a subcontract with Sebastian? They won't get a paradise because they work for CL or our CL, whatever his real name is. They don't get paradise. Is that what we're gonna find out here? I don't know. But Baldroy looks at him in shock. Hey! And the ground crumbles. He nearly falls into a chasm, but he clings onto the edge. Wah! And he looks back, and we see the hollowed out faces of Lau and Ada, and those might be the other patients at the sanatorium. I'm not quite sure. It's been too long since we've seen them. And he calls out to his wife and son, Joanna! Junior! And Sebastian lands in front of him. Should you not train some more before you serve your dishes to your family? Which might be, that could be a cruel framing of Sebastian telling him to live. Or the image of Sebastian telling him to live, possibly. I don't know. But Baldroy just mutters out, stop! And Baldroy kicks his hand away, and he falls into that chasm. And Sebastian just watches him fall with a smile, to be continued. Okay, Butler, we're back to our bad habits. Because, okay. My general opinion, with the exception of the Mayrin stuff, the Mayrin flashback is just too bad for words. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't really tell us anything about Mayrin that impacts the story at all. Right? It's just sort of, the answer Mayrin comes to, the question at the end of that flashback, doesn't really relate to the flashback at all. The problems with it are myriad, and I covered it years ago. You know what I'm getting at, though. The difference between that and this is that even with this chapter, I still agree. Once this is all over, once you can buy every single volume of the Blue Saga and read it in one sitting, this will be very good. This, there's some good stuff here. As Baldroy sort of accepts his death and then suddenly can't, as, Sebastian interrupts his little reverie. The problem is we don't really... There's no... How do I put this? If this were 14 pages, which I think is the page count, I saw that on iBooks. Let me check. I think it's 14 pages. But if this were 14 or so pages of a longer chapter, it would be just fine. It's 12 pages, actually. It's 12 pages. If this were 12 pages, last chapter was twice this length. And if this were the first half of a chapter that long, it'd be perfectly fine. You know what I mean? There's good stuff here that feels like the start of, you know, one, or I'm trying to find the right way to phrase this. It feels like it could be the start of an interesting further look into Baldroy, rounding out the sort of character focus we've had on him all mini arc here, as we maybe see the end of his life, depending on where this all wraps up. Though, the way, like, Sebastian's final line here sure seems like he's telling Baldroy to live, which again makes me wish we were focusing on Lau right now, because I feel like that's where the emotional crux of this whole storyline is right at the moment, on whether or not Baldroy lives or dies. The problem is, we have to wait another month for what's next. And that's the problem, and like, you know, like I said before, Butler firmly committed to being as slow-paced as humanly possible. Wishing I had more of a story is hardly damning criticism, but, like, it's just frustrating. It's the same frustrations Butler has been doing for eons. You know, it's years into it at this point. Every time I get a little hopeful. You know, every time Butler has a slightly longer chapter than usual, or slightly more eventful chapter than usual, I get a little hopeful that maybe, just maybe, is going to finally, you know, get back to the kind of propulsion and good pace that Butler had a decade ago at this point. And then it disappoints me again. So, you know, that is what it is. But yeah, this just feels like, it feels like the first part of a chapter. You know, there's no real climax, there's no, even like mini single chapter climax. It feels like it just kind of, it doesn't quite feel like it just sort of stops. Like, this is still a pretty definitive cliffhanger, or not definitive, but it's like, it's a pretty effective cliffhanger for what it is. It just, like, you know, it shouldn't be the cliffhanger because it's only 11 fucking pages. One of them is the covers. There's really 11 pages. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating for the reasons Butler's been frustrating for years at this point. And, you know, I should just say it's not going to change. I have to accept it. But I don't want to accept it. You know what I mean? But God, you know, it just... I guess it is what it is at this point. And again, I'm sure one day, a decade from now, when Yana finally finishes this whole arc up, we will be able to come back to this chapter, this storyline. New readers will buy the volumes, and they will breeze through this shit, and they'll really like it. But we're not living in that reality. We're living in the reality where we have to wait a month for 10 pages of nothing happening. You know? So yeah. After the really, really high-quality shit of last month, this is very much disappointment. And I just want to, you know, I still want to know what happens next, is the problem. There's still enough good shit here that I can't just, like, throw up my hand and say I quit. But, like, I wish we actually got more of that good stuff at a time. Because, God, there's just so little here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just really wish there was more. Which is, like, the same complaint I've been saying since 19 at the latest. Maybe even earlier than that. Honestly, I had some complaints about that in the early days of 2CT, though I never quite imagined how bad it'd be getting. Of the 2CT flashback, I should say. But yeah, I just wish there was more. I mean, I find the fact that it's Ada and Lau dragging Baldroy away from his family really interesting. You know, especially if they're currently giving him a blood transfusion. It's an interesting image. The idea that, like, him being revived is robbing him of paradise. That's an interesting concept. You can really explore that in a fun way. I never watched Buffy, but I think that is the premise of a season of Buffy from what I've heard. But it still can be done. It can be an interesting story choice. And, you know, maybe it will end up being a good story choice next month or the month after when Yana finally moves the story along enough that we actually get to Baldroy waking up. But for now, it's just like that little bit, that being Ada and Lau's faces, is easily the most interesting part of this chapter, and it's so little. It's such a little thing. Which is just the problem with Butler in general at this point. It's the problem I know going in. I should expect this at this point. But I still get disappointed every time. So yeah, all that being said, there's the potential this chapter could be good in the future, but for now it's just so fucking tiny, I don't know how you can enjoy it. So that said, I'm going to leave this video off here. Hope you'll enjoy the chapter and the video itself. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe, or, do whatever makes you happy, And as always, your life is your own, okay? Bye!